Readers, magnifying glasses, readers, magnifying glasses. Okay, so those of you will be able to read this, the rest of you probably can't. I'm sorry. But this will just help you to go to, it just gives you a little catch point of where we are. You'll have the full slides on the Informed Montessori blog. And so, but I thought I'd give you something. I just couldn't stand to print 4 pages of paper. You know, I just couldn't. So I'll pass these around. If we could just put some at the end down there, that would be great. Let's start with those. And I will trip and fall tonight, and it will be fun. Won't it, Jen? You'll edit that part out?
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm Barbara Fondren. I don't have my name tag on, darn it. I think that's important. And thank you very much for being here tonight. I'd like to just get to know who some of you are. I always like anytime we have a staff member here to let them introduce themselves so you kind of get to know all of our staff throughout the year when you come. And so, Mary Margaret, you want to start?
Hi, my name is Mary Margaret. I also forgot my name tag. I'm a co-teacher in Montessori, which is early education. And I have a daughter here who is in Montessori studio.
Great.
Hi, I'm Sally. I'm Sally Prophet. I'm a co-teacher in Rainforest, which is a 6th to 9th student.
Great. Jen, you next.
I am Jen. I am a co-teacher in 9 to 12 in Diamond Studio, and I have 2 sons here. One also in Diamond Studio, and one in Tundra.
Yeah, there you go. And then Glenn. Well, Julie, you want to go?
I'm Julie. I'm a co-teacher in Amethyst, and I have a son in nursery and a daughter in kindergarten.
What a great crowd, first of all. Thanks for coming out. Glenn Fondren, family liaison, Team Montessori, and the rest of our director. And the father of Casey Fondren, one of our alums.
She's like, great. Julie?
Julie Bundy, developmental specialist and teen advisor for the islands. I have 2 kids here, one in Diamond, one in Tundra.
My name's Ethan Kuntz. I'm a co-teacher in Sapphire at 9 to 12. I have 2 cats that don't attend the school.
Yet. Like it. Oh my gosh.
Hi, I'm Faith. I work in Pentagon in 3 to 6, and my 2 children graduated.
Another alum. I think we got all the staff. How many of you have children in the early childhood program? Okay, great. 6 to 9? 9 to 12? You're 9 to 12. 12 to 14? Do you see how the numbers are getting smaller? Pay attention, we're going to talk about that. 14, 18? Ooh, go back up again. Great. So we really appreciate you being here. When we were starting the school, and I was talking to a lot of school leaders, and most Montessori schools have a Montessori teacher and an assistant, either a part-time assistant or a full-time assistant. But I really felt like the co-teacher model was the best option because it allowed them to share the responsibility. One could walk out if they needed to, and it allows us to let you be our substitute teachers because there's always still a teacher in the room. And so I really appreciate you being here. Some of you are here because you'd like to sub and get more involved. Some of you are here because you want to volunteer more working with children. And so this will also help you probably with parenting. We have some staff, if they would like to talk, that have been here and have subbed, and now they're now teachers, and Faith gives me the dirty eye every time I do that. Faith is our substitute coordinator. So when a staff member wakes up and they're not feeling well, they text Faith at like 6:30 in the morning, and we communicate some, and we're all kind of helping to do that. And so it's really great to have a big group of people, so that we have 4 staff members expecting babies this year, and then there's the flu and lots of things. So we really appreciate that. Any of this current staff that were subs want to say anything?
I subbed.
For how many years? 2 years, okay.
It felt like longer. I was emailing almost every single day. I subbed every single age range from 3 to 6 all the way up to the teens. It's very different, But what's really cool is I can walk through the building and I know people on all sides, and it's really interesting to get that viewpoint from all sides.
Did it help you with your own parenting or support at home at all?
I will tell you, it was very eye-opening, because your snapshot of what happens in the studio it's only a snapshot, and really without that full picture, it's really hard to understand. We can explain to you all day long, but just going as a parent, seeing that and then being immersed in it, it really is truly eye-opening for how the education works and how to incorporate that into our life at home.
Yeah. And some have been subs and then teachers and now subs again, like Bill and Teresa. And we've got some super subs in the building like Teresa, and I think I saw Kim and Andy. And anything else anybody wants to say about subbing and supporting?
It's great to see how the other children are, the other learners are too. Because I remember I would say, my child, is that normal what they do? And then you get in the studios and you're like, oh my God, that is normal. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just interesting to realize how children are nowadays, and you realize how they're growing, how they're learning, and it's great to take it home and be able to help them also at home with their work, whatever work they happen to bring home, because you know what's taught in the studio, so you know what to help them with and where to stand back and say, you can do this yourself. I know you can. So this way they can help teach themselves.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. A short housekeeping. It won't be great. Next year when we're doing this, will be in the casa. And we'll have lots of space and probably comfortable chairs, so that'll be really cool. But if we can, if you have room to take a scoot this way on your seat so that some other people that are waiting to come in can join us, that would be awesome. Oh wow, you all are incredible. Golly, we can fit another bus of people in here now. Thanks for your support. So, you can go ahead and flip, Ethan. So this is our crew this year up here, and it's a pretty amazing group of people. And so you subbing and volunteering and want to be more engaged helps these guys every day. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it. So every year I relook at this, and those of you who have been here I hope recognize that I change it somehow in some way every single year, because we learn more and we grow more, and I try to think about how can I make it something that fills whatever needs each one of you has. So changing the paradigm of the way most of us were in school and what was expected by teachers, being conscious of what we teach. And so that just spoke to me that maybe that's why we're all here, right? Because many of us didn't grow up in a school like this. Did any of you go to a Montessori school as a young person? Look at that. So most of us don't have that experience. And we have to constantly put ourselves in check of changing that paradigm. Who knows who Dr. Shivali Sabari is? Okay, a few of you. And I have one of her books here with me. She has 3, I think, right now. I think I have all 3 of them that you can check out in my space. But she's a pretty neat woman. And although she's not Maria Montessori, I find that she's helpful for parents because she speaks, a very down-to-earth language. She's a clinical psychologist. And so I wanted to start with just a short snippet of one of her videos. And Ethan's going to help us out. You see okay?
Most of us parents thrive on our children seeking our approval. Now, on the surface, there seems nothing wrong with this. It seems the way to be. Children should seek their parents' approval. But there's a hidden danger here, and the danger is this. When we prime our children and raise them with the awareness, with the training, with the understanding that they need to constantly look outside of themselves, be it the parent, be it the teacher, for a sense of validation, worth, value, meaning, purpose, this is where the child's inner radar, gets distorted, and they lose the ability to gauge and be their own inner determiner of where they need to go in life. They begin to depend on this, on the external validation. Now, as parents who are traditional in their approach and who like to feel superior and powerful and dominant and in control, we love that kid who wants to please us. All of us wants that kid who pleases. But what we're doing in essence is raising a mini-me, a robot, a minion, a subject, and we're doing the child a disservice. So while it eases the parental tension and it creates a much easier life for the parent, we're really teaching our child to be divorced from their inner knowing. And when they grow up, they will flail in life, they will flounder, not knowing how it is to suffer the not understanding the self, to suffer that. You know, we parents rush in and try to fix it for our children and provide the solution and give them the label, you are this, you will be this, and give them judgments, you are good, you are bad. But let the child suffer the discovery of that on their own. That child who does that and goes through that process on their own will grow up to be a child who's much more resolute in the long run.
So I think that would have resonated with Maria Montessori as well. Dr. Sabari talked about that inner knowing. Maria Montessori said the child has within them everything they need. Any of us relate to that either as a child or as a parent or how we were parented, you know, and then when you walk in these doors, it's different. And so we try not to use any judgmental words with young people. And sometimes children will say that, is this good, is this bad, am I in trouble? And we're like, we don't have in trouble at this school. You know, we all make choices, we all have consequences to our choices. I help somebody that fell down, I might feel better about that. I laugh at someone that fell down, I might think it's funny for a minute, and then I might not feel so good. So consequences aren't things given to us, they're given from within. And so, you know, as we walk through tonight and talk about these things, please know this is a very informal conversation. Yeah, I've got a video camera and a microphone, but otherwise, it's very informal. And if there's something I'm saying doesn't make sense, you know, probably any specific individual comments about your own child can wait till after so that we don't, you know, put them in a position that's not respectful. But any general conversations or something that doesn't make sense philosophically, please don't hesitate to comment on that. And I'm hoping as we go through this, there's some quotes on here that some of you will choose to read those so that we have more of us participate in the conversation as well. Fair? Any other reflections from that video that anyone wants to share? Nora has some things.
She's been riding in the backseat with her teen brother as a driver, so that definitely resonates.
She has some things to say, yes. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting how she said most people will think their life is easier if their child is seeking their approval, but like as we've adopted the Montessori method, our kids are very independent. If I have a child come over who is like constantly asking me for attention, it's very interrupting.
Right.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
And actually I feel like parenting a Montessori child is so much easier.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. It's just different. You know, and then like some of our RISE staff, our infant and toddler staff were down here, and that too is so different, and it's hard at first, but then their lives are so much easier. Like I can't imagine, you know, doing this, not doing it in the way we do. Yeah, thank you. Important. Okay, Ethan? So the first thing we'll talk about is the preparation of the adult. Maria Montessori called it the spiritual preparation of the adult, which had less to do with religion and more to do with that inner knowing again, you know. What are those pieces that I bring with us each day that might cloud my judgment, you know, or did I have a boy that bullied me in school and so now I'm kind of like, you know, always watching the boys, you know, to watch that, or I felt a way about my own child and this friend that they had that might cloud my judgment. So that preparation of the adult's a really big part. So we're going to talk through some of those pieces. And here's a quote first. Who's got this one? Who wants to read that one?
The child builds his inmost self out of the deeply held impressions he receives.
Whew, it's a lot of pressure, isn't it?
We must help the child to act for himself, will for himself, think for himself. This is the art of those who aspire to serve the Spirit.
Any thoughts about that one? Anyone don't want your child to be any more strong-willed than they already are? there's an acting of independence, and then there's a willfulness, and then there's behavior, and those are all very different things. And part of the Montessori philosophy is about observing and understanding the difference between those pieces, so that we know how to best serve the child, right? So we're not enabling them in certain situations, but helping them to grow and flourish. Yeah.
Well, we talk about some children as willful or strong-willed, but really that's a lot of times that comes when we're imposing our will on them. If we go, to get ready for school, you need to make your bed and brush your teeth and eat your breakfast. Get those things taken care of and give them kind of that freedom and that space to do it within their own will. They're not so strong-willed, or they are strong-willed in that they get it done for themselves, because we've taken our will out of the picture and given them that space and that freedom to just do it.
Fair. Yeah. Another book I have in my place is called Kids Are Worth It. She talks a lot about that piece, that inner struggle and external struggle, and how so much of it is us. There's another book by Dr. Chevalier called Out of Control, and parents are like, yes, that's what I need. Like, she's talking about us. They're like, oh, so that whole piece, yeah. Anyone want the next one?
The mind to take some time to develop interest, to be set in motion, to get warmed up into a subject, to attain a state of profitable work. If at this time there is interruption, not only is a period of profitable work lost, but the interruption produces an unpleasant sensation which is identical to fatigue.
Anyone think of an example with your own children? You got one to share? Yeah?
When my daughter was in kindergarten, she didn't come here till 3rd grade, I think. When she was in kindergarten, I went to pick her up after school, and they had her sitting at a desk by herself in the corner. And I asked, what's going on? They said, well, she was building some blocks in a tower, and they told her it was time to stop, and they had to go to reading group, which she loves to read, so I was like, it wasn't, she didn't want to read, but she ignored them and continued building, and then they said, no, you need to stop, it's time to go now. So she shoved the blocks down, she went over and laid her head on the desk. She wouldn't do anything else for the rest of the day. And so she was just, later on, she said she was just mad because she was trying to finish her tower. Let her finish her tower.
Right. Yeah. I remember going in and watching my own children playing with something. I go, oh, look what you're doing. And then all of a sudden they're like, I'm hungry, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just stopped all what they were doing. And it's hard because most of us learned when we were young, and what our parents maybe had taught us is to praise and to, engage. And that doesn't mean you don't. It just means we know when. And so if you're in the building, there's a no-win. And so we think about when we approach a child, and Maria Montessori said even a smile can break a child's concentration. And so we really work to, to stay emotionally equilibrium, especially when a child's in concentration. We watch and observe. We think about what now do they need next? What's their next lesson? And so for you as a volunteer or sub, thinking through that process is also really important, because it can change the whole environment in just a few minutes when someone comes in and acts differently. So that's why you're here. So when we think about what adult supports look like, I have some papers for you. Will you all help to pass it out? Can you pass it out on the other side over here? Thanks, Anna. So this is adapted from a woman named Marie Conti, and she is a school leader in Pennsylvania, and she did some in-service work with our staff many years ago, and so we've kind of adjusted some of those things afterwards. But this gives you hints about communication. I gave away even my own copy. Can I borrow your copy, Kim? Would you mind looking off? Thank you. So we won't read all of these, but you can kind of get the gist of the way that we work towards communication. And some of these things, like great job, when I finished my secondary education degree as my undergrad, like they wanted you to say great job or good job a dozen times an hour in order to be a good teacher. And so it's a very different mode of accountability. And so we don't not say that because we don't care for that child. We want that child to create that inner discipline, that self-regulation, them not to look for me for approval, similarly to what Dr. Sabari was telling us about. So instead we might say, you really cleaned up every piece. And so we talk about what has happened instead of make that child feel like they're good, bad, right, wrong, those things. What else speaks to somebody from this page?
So I had a fake it till you make it approach whenever I've been in the studio because it was a bit
What?
tricky for me. So
Just kidding.
Good. That is blue. They'll look at my tree. I'm like, that is a tree. There's ways to sort of get yourself
train ourselves. Yeah.
And so because I still do it, and my kid's been here for a couple of years, and they still will say that stuff in the studio. So if you see something on here and you go to say something that
there's no buzzer, you're not going to get zapped or anything.
Pretty much kind of find a way, and I still find my way sort of faking it in some situations.
Sure.
Not,
No, I think that's fair.
That is a picture,
Yeah.
So, what do you think is my most favorite response? What do you think?
Yeah.
And then that either, they just kind of forgets about it. If you don't see something on here, you can usually.
Do you want to make some more? That's all we got. That's all right. You're way up there. Glenn, you want to make some more of these? I think we ran out.
There's 2 more.
There's 2 more. Let's see if I can get over here without tripping. Sorry. We'll play jump rope in a second. Who else needs one? Up here? Over here? Boy, this is fun. Did you need one? Oh, there you go. Anyone else? Any of these speak to them?
Helping versus hindering.
Helping versus hindering. How does that speak to you, Teresa?
Spending so much time with kids and working with teachers now and having these conversations all the time. The little person who comes to you and says, tie my shoe. And it's our natural adult inclination to bend down and tie their shoe, especially somebody coming in between, but maybe they know how to do it and they just want you to be with them while they do it. So it can be interesting to notice as a new person, doing it for them versus a little bit of inquiry, like, what do you usually do when you tie a shoe in your studio? Gives you some information about that, so you're not doing it for them, but participating in figuring out how to get it done. And you'll know if you've done that accidentally because all of a sudden you have a mind to do that for them.
Yeah. So that helping versus hindering. I'm going to repeat some things just because it's all going through this microphone. That part of, Marie Montessori said, don't ever help a child to do something that they could do for themselves. And so, like with the shoe tying, you could say, show me which part you already know. And that, they're like, well, actually, I know how to tie my whole shoe, but I just don't tie it tight enough and it comes untied. Oh, you're working on the tight part. That's the hard part. Show me where you're at right now. Maybe we could talk about a double knot, And so it's that kind of conversation instead of just doing for them. Faith, what were you thinking?
Same thing really.
Yeah.
I think as people walk in the studio, it's hard to watch children struggle with like a puzzle map or a work and really want to help them. That's the part that can be hard where they don't need help, they're not asking for help, but they just look frustrated. I know when I first started, I walked with my hands in my pockets and behind my back a lot because I was always busy. So, just be aware of that when children are frustrated, that's okay. They'll figure it out. If they don't, they'll ask for help. So.
Yeah, it's a hard one. It is. Anything else that speaks to anybody on here that they want to share?
I think the most important thing for me of all of this is listening versus being heard. They're all super important, but just you're talking, in anywhere in life, if you're talking to someone and you make eye contact and actually listen to what they're saying and take it in and not formulate a response, I think it's super important. So when you're listening and not only just with your ears, but also with your observations and with your, just listening to observing someone working, like, oh, I'm not going to grab them for an advisory or talk to them right now because they're clearly really deep in the math tower or whatever.
Just really respectful. Active listening, active watching, active participating, yeah.
With older ones, it goes hand in hand with the helping versus hindering, because most of what they need is social. And, you know, having a conversation for them or interrupting what they're doing can often be the hindrance.
Yeah.
Or solving their problems for them if it's like, hey, this happened.
And I'll say from her early ed perspective, the positive phrasing has really helped in our house. It has like changed our life.
Give an example of that.
So don't stand on a chair. Greta gave this example. Don't stand on a chair versus you can sit on a chair. Like you can see their brains go, oh, can I sit on this chair? I'm going to test if I can sit on the chair. And then they sit on the chair. It worked and no one got frustrated.
So you may, as the beginning.
You may or you can, yeah. Right.
In our house, because I'm just so used to now saying you may, then it forces me to find a phrase here.
That's right.
Because if I say that you may first, then I have to find a positive way to do it. You may keep your hands to yourself. You may sit down if they're standing.
Yeah.
I'm really appreciative.
Goes back to the will conversation too, right?
Yeah.
It's less likely. Yeah. There is a way to say that, right? There's a way you can say you may, and it's just like you're being willful again to that child, right? So it's that emotional equilibrium again of, you know, don't stand on the furniture, and you say, you can sit on the furniture, you know, and just say it without emotion, without judgment, just matter of fact. And then you remove yourself from getting into a willful conversation with your young person that you're supporting. On the very back, one of them says, put your work away for me. You know, in some schools, the for me is really big, and we don't use that phrase. Why? Why don't you do this for me? Any thoughts on that? Do you have something, Julie?
Because we're trying to build that themselves.
Yeah, right. And so it goes back to that first video again. Now they're about pleasing me, and like Teresa said, now I've got a line of people lined up that want to please me instead of helping them do it for themselves. And so this says, your work is out. What do you need to do? Did you put your work away? And so we just turn that around. It's not for me or to make me happy. It's for them. So here are some other things, and Teresa started us with helping versus hindering, observing versus staring. Anyone have an example of that?
I really struggle with this because I think all of us, we really like our kids and we want to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like what new things they're learning. And so she's drawing, I'm like, oh, I can't look too much. And then she's like, oh, hi, Mama, I did. And I'm like, oh, that's entering her world.
Okay.
Back a little bit, she could have kept being in her world.
So staying back a little bit, not being too invasive in that. Oxel, did you want to share something else?
I was just thinking about being in Esmeralda's studio at one point and having a group of learners working at a table, and they were all starting to feel like they were fishing for my attention, trying to get a reaction or wanting to because I was new to the studio, or just the person whose attention could be gotten. It got to a point where I felt like I just needed to direct my attention elsewhere.
Right. Yeah. So how'd you hold yourself in the environment, and how you redirect yourself from their thought process? If you ever observed a studio where the teacher is observing, what you'll notice is that they always have pen and paper, you know, or computer, and they're looking and they're taking in, and they're usually writing down, and oftentimes, if you want to come in and volunteer or sub, your first step is with Faith or one of the studio teachers about planning a time just to come in and observe. And so when you bring a piece of paper and you look around, they can see that you are doing work, you know? And so that helps you from getting to the point of like, gosh, you know, and all of a sudden they're like, you know, especially as they get between 12 to 14, now they're skeptical, you know, and now you've just maybe broken a trust process that you might not be able to get back into again. And these women that do a lot of that age level are like, yep, you know, so, you know, just finding a way to, and it's really hard because when you get to this end of the building, they're busy a lot. You don't know what to do. And so sometimes it will look like you're staring. And so, you know, bringing something that you can write down, helping one of the studio teachers do something, some work that they're working on, putting some different materials together, things that can kind of keep you busy, but you're still observing. You can still see what's happening. Part of that too is to keep your back to the wall, wherever you are, and you'll notice, in the teaching staff, if we do this well, we're having a conversation, our back's always so we can see the rest of the room. We wouldn't stand in the middle of the room like this talking to a child, because now I've just lost everything that's behind me. So, when we're doing that observation piece and or being a member of that community, we want to look so we could see, and we're looking out not just in the 60-inch radius, but all the way around the room in that same part. Talking versus nagging. Anybody been ever guilty of that in the room? Most of us. It's hard. In this context, what do you think it looks like? Can you may become nagging?
Yeah, if you say it.
That's right. You may sit. You may sit. You may sit. And that there. Now we've just crossed the line, and now we're nagging. Katie?
I said that Kenwood, I think it was last year, and I didn't realize, I've taught here before and I thought I got it.
You did.
But it was something that the kid was supposed to put away, and it was just back and forth where I think I went into nagging. But what you're really doing, and what was said to me, and it was very humbling, was it's a power struggle at that point, and you're trying to assert your power over that child, and that's never okay, and they're never going to give in. So you're creating this dynamic that doesn't need to exist, but it's hard to catch. So feedback is really important, and being able to receive feedback, I think, even if your heart's real big and into it, can be hard but very beneficial.
Yeah. So, put your ego away. Try to really watch, hear what other people have to say, because sometimes we don't know when we've crossed that line. And other times they'll let us know when we've crossed that line. And so, just really being conscious of that. Encouragement versus praise. Yeah.
I think it kind of goes back to that helping versus hindering stuff sometimes. We have 3 almost 4-year-olds. Every now and then he'll be like, Mommy, help me get my hands on whatever. I can look at him and say, okay, what do you need help with? Is it just fight?
Yeah.
Mommy to get you a belt? Or are you just wanting me to do it for you?
Yeah.
He's had this thing like he wants to save you everywhere these days. And I'm not sure what that's about, but I'm like, no, you're a big boy now, you can walk. But I will walk with you.
Yeah, and so you're bringing up a lot of different things there. One is observing what is it that they are needing from you right now. And when we do make it a response that just starts enabling, we're in a hurry and we're like, yes, okay, I'll put your pants on, And they're like, Mom, put my pants on, Now can you put my shoes on and tie them? And so, want to hold me all the time. And that happens a lot, especially for young 3 and 4-year-olds, the first part of the school year. The parents are like, I'm letting you walk in by yourself. And then they're like, they want to hold me. Okay, I'll hold you forever. And so we have to be conscious of, am I doing it for them or for me? And then, if that child's asking that, I think what you really want is a hug. Can I give you a hug? Can we try that? Let's try that today. I'll give you a hug. And so then we move on, We try not to ask questions for things we don't want a different answer for, except for the one answer that we were looking for. Right? And so, and that falls into encouragement versus praise a lot, because sometimes we'll, even us as teachers will get into, like Katie was just talking about, I'll say, so, do we want to be respectful to other people? And you have a child that's on that Einsteinian realm, and they go, no. And you're like, uh-oh, I did it. I set myself up. And now I'm putting them in a position, that is not fun to be in. And so we try not to ask questions that we only have one answer to. And that way we don't have to say whether somebody's right or wrong or good or bad, that kind of thing. And if they say something that is absolutely not accurate, we could say, I've never thought about it that way. We'll have to keep thinking about that. I wonder if there's a way for us to test that, Because some of us are like, oh my gosh, she said, Asia and she meant China, and there's no way I can let this go. And they're not going to remember that for the rest of their life, right? And so we have to think about what's most important in that process. And so taking risks, I find, is a really important skill. Children to take risks for what they think about something instead of only wanting to give the right answer. And so we do a lot of encouragement. If a child's just finished putting all the tiles in order from 1 to 100, and they come over excitingly, and they go, oh, I did it, all 100. I'm like, oh my gosh. How long did that take you? In 1 minute, it was easy. They walk away. Right? So sometimes we don't even know. And if you're just in the room, you will have no idea what is easy or hard, or, and so until you ask and ask more questions and say, well, tell me about it. Tell me what was the hardest part. Did you do it start with 1? Did you organize it by 10s? Like, what did you do? And that feels good too. And it feels like you're a partner with them instead of you're the one giving them the gold star or the red star or whatever that process is. Listening versus being heard. So we talked about that a little bit too. How do we, Ethan was bringing that up to us about really, it's hard when you're observing and a child comes over and they want to tell you about the puppies that they looked at over the weekend because their family's getting a new puppy, and it's like a 4-minute conversation and you really want to hear it, but you're really not listening because, you've got to do this lesson, you've got this other thing, and you're in there as a parent and you're trying to figure out, like, I was supposed to do this and I was supposed to do that. And so sometimes you can say, I want to hear about all the puppies that you saw. Can we talk about when we go outside in a few minutes? That's okay, I'm finished. Or, yes, I want to, that kind of thing. And so making sure that if a child's really sharing something with us, we do take that time. And oftentimes sometimes we feel like that's where we spend the majority of our time, as in that emotional, social support. But we have to be genuine. Children and teens are the first one to recognize when we're not being genuine. Concur? And so if we try to snow them in some way or like halfway do it, and you could see them, they start looking at you differently. You've probably seen this as a parent, And so really just being present with them. And if you can't be present, just tell them, I'm really sorry, I really want to hear this right now, but my mind's thinking about this other thing I need to focus on first. Can I come check in with you in a few minutes? And that's really appropriate and respectful for them. Gain respect versus demand respect. This is a hard one for some of us in the room, I'm telling them to call all the teachers by Mr. and Mrs. I want them to look in my eyes when I speak to them. And this child got really angry at me and stomped away, and I think that's disrespectful. And so, so all of those things may be something for you personally, but how do we help that child to gain respect? Collaboratively, instead of try to coerce, force, or bully them into respecting us, right? Don't we do that sometimes when we tell a child, you don't talk to Mrs. or Mr. somebody like that? Well, does that mean it's okay for them to talk to their little brother like that? Like if we act like the adult is more important than anybody else, you did this to a teacher, I get it. For some of us, that's hard because that's the way we grew up. What I'm challenging you to do is that we don't see the difference, that we try to see all of it as that. And when a young person, which I've been, somebody has spit at me before and they've cussed at me and they've kicked me and hit me, and over 20 years, most of the things you would probably put in the not respect column I've seen. And, but, I also, I understand the development of children, not perfectly, but I've studied a long time, and I know that this child's really not trying to be disrespectful in most cases, right? They really are trying to be heard in some way. They're trying to get some kind of control over something. And so it's my job to help them to find the pieces to fit those together. And so when you're in that environment, if you're feeling that way, you're getting triggered in some way, please go to an adult and let them help you with that. You can always go to Faith or Shannon or Jen and say, can you, I'm struggling. They've said this to me twice when I've asked them to please choose some work that they need to practice, and I can't handle that anymore, and we will help you. And I'm sure from you ladies, you could say it gets better. You start to find new paths through that process.
And if you're not in that room all the time, you don't know what's going on with
right,
the child.
Right.
So, I've had one time that was pulling on me, and it took me to reflect back on it to say, oh, he wanted to go for a walk. I should have said, can I take you for a walk? But I wasn't understanding what was going on with the total package thing.
Right. Yeah. And as teachers, we can't share with you all those pieces, you know, for confidentiality reasons, and for respect of that child reasons. And so you may not know all of that. I mean, we'll give you what you need to know to be in that environment, but you may not know all of that. And so sometimes you have to just assume that there's something that you may not know about this and handle it in that way, because that might sometimes makes us just feel better in that situation.
I think also just telling them sometimes when you're first starting to sub, you just think you need to know everything. And sometimes when they come up and say they want to do X, Y, Z, and you just don't know in that environment if they're allowed to do X, Y, Z, saying, you know, I don't know the answer to that. And I think the kids expect you more when you say, you know, I don't know the answer to that. Let me see if I can find the answer. Let me see if I can get you some help on that. But right now, usually, you know, it's like a case where maybe the co-teacher's gone to lunch or stepped out to the bathroom. And it's like, just give me a minute and we'll figure this out. But, you know, you just automatically think, I got to know everything.
Right.
Sometimes just saying, I don't know. I think a lot of times the kids are expecting more.
Absolutely.
You're saying, you know, hey, they're respecting my environment. They're not allowing me to do this. And sometimes it's like, oh, that's okay. And then you realize they weren't supposed to do that.
Right.
They were testing.
Yeah.
And that does.
Yeah, it does.
And they'll get other ones to say, yeah, we do it that way.
Yeah.
And we do it that way. We do it that way. You'll get conflicting, or you'll get all one answer, and you're like, no.
And then you'll look over and the one that you know the best one.
And just like you said, just saying, you know, I don't know, and it sounds like you know, but I don't, so let's just wait, you know, so that we can all know together. And that goes a long way. Normative culture versus social rules. And so this is a hard one, and it's kind of goes right along with what you were just saying, that oftentimes there becomes a rule in the class that you didn't even know. The teachers find this out too. They're like, what? What do you mean all of us are rhinoceroses because we have a pinky, you know, or something? And you're like, what? And so, but oftentimes it happens with things like this, that, you know, if you bring a sandwich, then you have to share half of it with somebody else. And, you know, we'll look up and realize, like, this is happening with 7 children every day, and I did not know this was happening. And it's become a normative culture instead of something we've talked about as a group. And oftentimes you'll hear the studio say, well, we haven't really talked about that as a class. You know, we eat the food that we bring or something like that. And so if you don't know, you just ask, and that helps from not being, you know, if you have a partner at home and you're giving one answer and the partner's giving the other answer, right, it becomes the same thing. So always just saying, like, you know, we're just going to wait and have that conversation, so all of a sudden you don't turn around and figure out everyone's doing something that we all haven't discussed already. And so we want to do that part different. High ethical standards for all we do and say. Like, we are honest with children. We try to remove our ego. We really work to, you know, if we make a mistake, we say, I made a mistake, you know. My best example and the most humble example I could give you is we had an observation day, and I was really trying to get finished with this young person that was really struggling so I could do this observation. And Glennon started it, and there was about 20 people, and he said he needed to go to the restroom, so I walked into the restroom, and we came back out. He just started yelling something at me, and it triggered me, and I said, shut your mouth. And he goes, you said shut your mouth? Oh my gosh. And he started saying this really loud. As the group's getting closer to me, you know, my ears are getting warm. And I looked at him and I said, I made a mistake. Oh, yes, you did. And I'm like, oh, stay humble. I made a mistake. You're right. I made a mistake. Let's go back to MySpace and we'll talk about it. And, you know, it's really, I think it's one of the most important things we do as adults, is to let our young people know that we are not perfect, that we've made mistakes in our life, that we make a mistake still in our life. We tell them about our social situations or our work situations where we fell short or someone else fell short, because that's how they figure those pieces out. And so if that's hard for you, tell your co-teacher, like, this is really hard for me, you know, or this part or that part, because it is really important for these young people to only see adults making the best ethical decisions. And we don't say things like, I've got a coffee, I'm hiding it, you know. So if the children don't have coffee in the environment, we don't have coffee in the environment. We can go to the media center and have our coffee, and then we come back in the room. But we really try to not have double standards or to act like we're going to not abide by the rules because somebody else isn't watching, you know, so that's important too. question any of us anytime. So we really feel like that when new subs and volunteers come into the room, that helps us to see things maybe we didn't see before. And I know all of us have different experiences with that, and we don't want to burn bridges, or we don't want to have conflict, we don't feel comfortable with that, but we really do appreciate it. We'd much rather hear from you, like it made me, uncomfortable when these 3 children were over here for like 30 minutes. It didn't look like they were doing anything at all. And I just wanted you to know that I'm feeling this way, and that teacher were like, thank you so much for sharing. I don't know if you know, but they were also doing this da-da-da-da-da, or I didn't realize that. I will take care of that and make sure I can give better attention to that. Either way, it's good information for both of us, so please don't hesitate. My door's always open, Glenn's, all of us want to hear those things because that helps us to be a better school. And I'm not just blowing air. I believe that. And I want you to know you have all of our permission to at any time question any of us or say, I don't understand, or I thought you said we don't do this, but then I heard you say this and I'm confused. Like, that's what makes us better as a community. Okay, and so what is generally known as discipline in traditional schools is not activity, but immobility and silence. Anyone ever seen that before? It is not discipline, but something that festers inside a child, arouses his rebellious feelings. So Dr. Maria Montessori said this, and let's hear now what Dr. Sabari says similarly.
So parents are over-concerned over how to create rules. What rules should my child follow? How should I institute rules? How should I embody them? And my answer to them is to begin from a different place. Don't start at the rule-based, how do I implement rules? Start at a different place. The place I want parents to start thinking about rules is not with behavior, but about relationship. How, as a parent, am I embodying a relationship to my own sense of a rule-based life? And how do I help my child navigate internal rules? Rules, when fixated on external behavior, are going to go awry very quickly. You're going to make a chart, you're going to have a naughty step, you're going to have a stool, you're going to have a timeout corner. None of those will work because the rules are being artificially imposed. For rules to truly work, what that really means is that there needs to be an inner sense of grounding. So when a parent begins to model living a life which is clear, consistent, organized, non-chaotic, and grounded in a sense of methodology, the same thing kind of happens over and over again, then quite naturally the child will follow. The behavior will follow. There is no need to now, let's impose a rule about how we talk. It's how we talk. There's no need to impose a rule about who does chores. We all do chores. It's part of family contribution. There's no need to institute a rule over language or over cell phone use. It's just how things are done in the family. So I like parents to shift away from enforcing rules because it just rigidifies their notion that they're in control and they need to be dominant, and take it to a more circular-based perspective where rules are happening organically. It's the embodiment of your own values, your own leadership in your own life.
So hopefully I didn't offend anybody with that video. And it does put a lot of pressure on us, I think, as adults and humans and parents. But it is something we really try to work on. Of course, we have classroom ground rules, and the goal is that it comes from the community. We develop it from within. And then that 3-year cycle is part of what helps that process too. And oftentimes in every studio throughout the building, they'll talk to that older group about their role, because if they do something that's not part of that community's culture, it becomes the normative culture, and then things shift away from that. And many of you might have noticed, when we're calm, when our life's going well, our job's going well, our relationships are going well, our children do better. When we start to feel chaotic or things are flipping around in different ways and our relationship is struggling, we might notice those same behaviors start to happen in our own child. I always encourage families at home to do a family meeting, like similarly to what we do at school. And so we talk about, You know, we kind of had a family meeting when the teens started bringing phones 10 years ago to school, and they all wanted to use them all the time. So we're like, okay, so here's the things that are going well. Here's the things some of our members of our community are struggling with. How do we come up with a solution, right? And we've come up with a pretty good solution. It works, you know, most of the time. And so that's what you're after. And so anyone have any examples of that at your own home that you want to share? It's like, who wants to share dirty laundry or positive things? I don't know.
We entered into a contract when Spencer got his phone. Of course, my background was
A lawyer, yeah.
but instead of me just doing an edict and saying, no, this is what it's going to be, we sat down and made ground rules.
Yeah.
And we each had ideas as to what we wanted it with them. And then I typed it up and we all read through it and we agreed to it and we all signed it. And I won't say the contract wasn't breached pretty quickly, but we also discussed breach and discussed why and, you know, consequences and everything was, you know, it was a lot easier than if I just given him the phone and he had an issue and the phone was taken. We talked everything through and it worked out beautifully, and I think we had a lot work out to where when he got his phone back, he understood what was going on and why we did what we did.
And the goal was to have ownership in it, not feel like it was just something that's being put on somebody else. And oftentimes you'll see studio teachers when a child's struggling, or if two children are struggling, sometimes they'll make a plan, and oftentimes they'll write it down, and then we make that the conversation instead of me versus them. We're like, well, what did we say? I'm like, I don't know what we said. Well, let's just go look at it again. Where did we put it? Okay, let's go read it. Okay, so this is what we said. Oh, okay. We hold, you know. We wait for them to go, yeah, I said when this is going to happen, that this other thing, I'm going to put all that away. Okay. All right, thanks. Okay, see you later. You know, I don't have to say, see, I told you so. I don't have to say, if you just would have done it the first time. You know, like it's just, there's no judgment attached to it. It's this third point that becomes that conversation. And so you'll see that in the communities that we work really hard not to be like the teacher decides. So they'll use lots of we language instead of I language, and us instead of me. And so, you know, when you're in the environments, those are things we hope you also integrate into your conversations. Any other conversations about that? Was that hard for anybody? I'm not telling you can't use stickers. I'm telling you that from my research and what we do here, we just don't find it's effective as really communicating with a young person and making a plan for consistency. You know, similarly to what was said earlier, it feels like it's more work, but it's less work in the long run. When you do that part in the upfront way, then it helps to work over time instead of feeling like it's my way or the highway. You know, that might feel simpler first, but later it won't be. Katie?
I was just looking at faces, and some people seem a little overwhelmed, and I still feel that way sometimes, and I did especially in the beginning, but just know that you can always slow down. And like, I work up in the nursery and it's a little different than what I did before, and I will literally just stop and listen to the other adults to hear that dialogue, to hear what they're observing, or I can come back to them later in a private moment and say, this is what I saw, this is what my first instinct was to do, how would you have handled it?
Yeah.
So you don't have to just be initiated all the time into a situation. That's part of that observation. You're not only observing the learners, but hearing the teachers and the staff.
Right.
Or steps that have been here a long time. That's really, really helpful.
Yeah.
You don't have to get it all at once, is all I'm saying.
Right, yeah, none of us do, and all of us. I told you one of my worst stories, but those things happen every year. There's things I know I can do better and learn from. Okay. So, these are things we've kind of already talked about, but modeling behavior instead of setting rules, that whole process of, you know, how do we walk the walk? If we say as a family or as a community that we don't do this thing, then we can't do it because we're the adult. You know, and even when I know that the community down here in the teens program, we don't have our cell phones out unless we're in a studio. And so I try, even though I'm getting a phone ring or I'm getting a text, I walk into a studio before I open it up, because that's the deal, And so we try to model those same behaviors. It's probably one of the first conversations we have with new applicants that want to be teachers at our school. I remember one of the first people I interviewed back in 1998 or 99, and she said, so you're telling me every time I want to talk to a child, I have to get up and walk over to talk to them? And I said, well, do we want children to scream across the room? And she goes, no, but I'm the teacher. And I said, yes, that's what we would do. And she goes, well, I can't do that. And I said, thank you very much for coming. And so, it's like we all have to have our limits with that, and we all have to know what's, what we're really capable of. And after you hear this conversation today, if this feels like, gosh, I don't know if I can do that, then you may want to wait, or you may just want to observe for a while. But we think so highly of all the young people in this building. We want to have the most consistent adults possible for them. So discipline versus interdiscipline. How do we help this young person to recognize something besides us saying to them, well, that's rude, or that's disrespectful? And I remember having this conversation for 20 minutes or so with a parent last year, and they said, well, I don't think my child knows what's disrespectful until I tell them what's disrespectful. And I said, so that's curious, it would be interesting to have that conversation with your child. Have you asked them? And they're like, well, no, I haven't asked them. I said, well, that might be a place to start. Ask them what is respect. We use these words like they mean big things, but if we want them to do it from within, that interdiscipline part, they have to develop that from within. We cannot force, coerce, inoculate, pour in. We can't do it. And so, who knows who Eddie Haskell is? Right? Some children get really, really good at saying things a certain way in front of adults and then act completely different outside of there. There's hardly a week that goes by that I don't have a conversation with a teenager about congruency. And we all know adults that aren't congruent. And so trying to help them to think about, and sometimes I'll say to them, listen, I can't control that, but you just heard your peer tell you how angry they were, and you're going to have to think about how you want to move on from that. You're saying you didn't do it. They're clear that you did. The other person said they heard you said it too. I'm just saying, you're going to have to figure out how you're going to maneuver this, because they're going to be in your life a whole lot longer than I'm going to be in your life. And so helping them to recognize that instead of me telling them that's wrong, here's your punishment. Who's heard of the term, it just came out of my mind. We were reading about it last night, Casey. The discipline thing in Jefferson County. You're reading about it in the Leo. Do you have it? Restorative justice. Does anyone know what that term means? So, I think our disciplinary process at the school is very similar to restorative justice. So it really tries to help that young person to think about what kind of we talk about, like if they decided to bring drugs to school, what's your restitution plan? How are you going to make this better? And so that they have to figure out a plan in order to be back as a member of the community again. And so we do that a lot with, our regular environment too, to try to help young people to think about what do I need to do to make this right again. Kim, bless her heart, was subbing, and this is a very rare situation where some children decided to dare each other to drink some of the cleaner that was in the room. And so it was not toxic, thank goodness, and they were all okay. But just us putting punishments on them without also making them know that you're going to have to make some kind of restitution to how you go back. And sometimes young people then might write a paper that they read back to the community. Sometimes they go visit a police officer about whatever this particular thing is, so they come up with what those plans are. And sometimes you're not going to know all those pieces and parts. And so just knowing that, if that discipline is not something that can happen in a black and white way or in a one-time conversation. It's a lifetime process. Some of us will go home tonight, we'll go down Klerner Lane and we'll get a speeding ticket because there's been a police officer there, because we still haven't interdisciplined ourselves to go the speed limit when we don't think a police officer's there, right? And so then we get that feedback, and for the next maybe 2 to 5 years, depending on what the fine is, we might respond differently. And so, unless we have those natural responses that occur, we don't change our behavior behavior. And neither do children and teens. And so we work really hard. And so if you're in an environment and you're wondering, like, why are we okay with this child doing this? Or why are we okay with them acting this way? Because if this child says this one thing, and we go in to save the other child who they spoke unkindly about, how does that other child ever learn to set personal boundaries with somebody else? And so oftentimes we'll go to the other child and say, you know, did you want help, or were you going to set a boundary for yourself, or what was your thought? Well, I actually called them stupid first. Oh, so what do you think you want to do now, or what? Yeah, we probably should talk about this because we're getting into a bad habit, you know. And I'm like, okay, so did you like help with that, or do you want me just to stand nearby? I think you can just stand nearby, you know. So that means something different than us being just, you know, say you're sorry. Does that work? Has anyone ever known a child that says sorry, and then 10 minutes later you're having the same conversation again? So we don't force children to say they're sorry at our school. If that comes organically from them, that's their decision, but it does not come from us. Instead, we say, what do you think you need to do? They're crying. They said they don't feel safe. I'm sorry. Okay, that's your decision with that, but not because, I'm sorry, and then they're gone on to the next thing, and we're having the same conversation. Do you want to add anything to that, Faith? Any questions or comments about that? Easy stuff.
Well, you might have a child, two children, and one might call one something, and they know that they hurt their feelings, but they might tell you they need time.
Yeah.
They may need to take a break, go do something, and then come back to it.
Just like we do.
Yeah, because they might not be sorry.
And maybe most of you are really good at relationships, but sometimes with Glenn and I are not seeing eye to eye, like when I wanted that puppy for my 50th birthday this year. I was not ready to tell him I was sorry for being snappy at him, you know? I needed some time. And so sometimes we just expect children to snap into gear in that moment. And so we can share with them, like, it seems like you're not really ready to have this conversation. And when do you think you want to try again? Or do you want to go do something independently without anybody else with you right now until you're ready? And so those are all ways that we support that. Yeah.
Well, we talk a little bit about this too, because I think we as a society wants to just kind of quick fix on that sometimes and just get it over with. We all live in this busy world, but not everybody calms down the same way the other person can calm down and process truly how to connect on what I take ownership of. And so sometimes giving time, allowing your learner, particularly whose brain's not developed, to have that opportunity to give them some time to process it versus just quickly trying to get them to think like you as your adult brain is doing. I think that's something we fall short quite often.
Which is the difference between regulating a child and helping a child to self-regulate. You know, when I'm going for a quick fix, I'm regulating my child. We are in church. You may not say this, right?
But would it be more beneficial to look at it? Because really, it's just suppression. It's not.
It's really what?
Suppression.
Suppression.
It's not actually changing anything.
Yeah. Did you want to expand on that? What you would do differently?
No. I mean, just like when you change your mindset and realize that that's what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, is that really what you want to do to your child?
Right, yeah. And most of us get into a place like that. I know, yeah. And so we sometimes get in that place where we just want to suppress the behavior. But the reality is if we want to change it, it never changes always and for everything. You know, it's a process, just like all of us. None of us are perfect in that. But if we want our young person to self-regulate, then we have to really be observant and cautious of if we're trying to suppress them and make them act a certain way because we think that's the way we're supposed to teach them. And so, and I think there's a time and a place, you know, we're going to your great-grandmother's house. It's really stressful for her when you run in the house. And so we're going to have to make a plan of that running's only going to happen outside. because, that's what we decided last time we went. So I just want to remind, and so we're having that conversation. And when they start to run, instead of us yelling at them, we walk to them and say, I don't know if you remember, I weren't running in the house, And so, when they come to that on their own and they verbalize that, instead of us say, stop running, instead we walk over calmly, we sit there with them. Sometimes just that motion by itself, they're like, oh yeah, I forgot, and so it's a difference between being impulsive, which is their work right now for some part of it, and us trying to make them what we would do, Thanks. Supporting discipline through a restorative justice model. We talked about that. Conflict resolution. And so this is a big one. It's really different. We really want to support young people in resolving their own conflict. And so you'll hear us say that if your child comes home, we ask you that you can walk back in with them. You can email us and say that they're going to come and talk to us. But the more we put the words through their mouth instead of through the adult's mouth, the better they'll help to process and get strong and stronger conflict resolution. There's many of us in this room right now that do not like conflict, and we have coworkers that do not like conflict, and so we've become a culture of passive-aggressive behaviors, and some of that results on social media. And so the way that we can start with that here, and actually where Katie works up at the nursery, at the infants and toddlers is where it starts, is to help them to be able to have those conversations. So when two children and you're in there and the teacher just went to the restroom, they say, she hit me, well, he threw my pencil, and no, she threw, all of this conversation. It's not your job to fix that. So wait, there's two people talking at the same time. That could be the first thing you say. I'm wondering if you both want to talk so you can both be heard. Did you want, who would like to start that first? Okay, so you would like to start? Okay, wait, you're going to talk to him, right? I don't need to hear. I'm just here to support you. But don't you want to say, what do you want him to know? I want you to know that I don't want you to steal my pencil. But calm, take a breath. I think he really wants to hear you, but right now your voice is really strong. I'm whispering this, and I'm trying to help them to resolve this conflict on their own. And when we do that, and we whisper to them, and we say, do you want to let them know that that was your pencil, and you put it down the table, and you weren't finished with it? I wasn't finished, depending on the age. Too many words, too much. So we try to help them to resolve the conflict, and we know, there are times and places where we're going to pull one aside and have that other conversation with them, or set a new boundary or something. But for now, we want them to be able to speak their own piece with one another. And so if you're in the space, you'll see we don't make kids separate from each other. We don't make them, sit across the room and not be able to play with each other for the rest of the year. We want them to resolve the conflicts, and sometimes they might ask for a break from the other, and that's okay. But we try not to impose all of that on us. It's about them resolving that the best way they can. Any thoughts about that? Okay, Ethan. Preparation of the environment. So we really ask if you're a sub or even if you're a volunteer and you want to help do this process, if you've ever spent time really observing all the pieces and parts in the environment, it is a lot. All those little puzzle pieces all have knobs. They all need to be on the knobs and to be dusted every once in a while, those kinds of things. So we do ask subs to come 20 minutes before. If you're not able to sub, but you can come, that 20 minutes before school starts and help prepare the environment, roll the rugs, sanitize. Those are great skills and things they need. Vacuuming. So those are great ways to be involved in that. And so these are just some of the shelves, and these all go in a certain spot. They all go back to the certain spot. They all are cleaned, and fresh noodles or water or whatever it is are put in there, especially in early childhood. Okie doke.
Barbara, is that a time when, if you are signed up to clean the studio, that you could do it in the morning?
Like before school? Yeah.
20 minutes.
So each studio will do that a little bit differently. Sometimes, like on Tuesdays, the co-teachers might be working in there on preparation. So they might say Wednesday or Thursday. So just ask the studio teachers. Yep. Thanks. Great. Yeah. So daily schedules all look a little differently. Each studio decides that. We don't have a rule. at the school. Most of the time, at some point during the day, sometimes in the morning, there's a class meeting or a group. There's a work time. This Maria Montessori called it the 3 hours of uninterrupted work time. There's small group lessons or large group lessons, like large group more in the teens program, small group in the elementary, individual lessons in the early childhood. They'll have a work plan or a learning plan or advisory notes. So if you're in there subbing, you could say, do you have anything on your advisory notes you have to do if you're down the teens program? If you're down the elementary, do you have a learning plan? Do you have any goals that you've set for the day? And then they'll obviously have snack that you know about, and there's lunch. Outside time, we call that outside time instead of recess. Job crew responsibilities, so whatever those end of day responsibilities look like, and the beginning and the end of the day for the adult responsibilities. So all of those things are pretty consistent at some time during the day in every studio. Okay. So, a lot of these things we've already talked about. Prepare and break down the room is part of that studio assistance role. That sub, come in with an open mind, refraining from any judgments about a child that you saw pinch your child that day, or, somebody that adult-wise, you're not sure about their child, so we erase all those judgments when we walk in. Be aware of your own manner. We really encourage you not to bring, to wear strong perfumes, or any perfumes, really. Essential oils are usually okay, but that can really affect children. It can affect their mood, their behaviors. It could affect their sinuses, their headaches, those kinds of things. So being really aware of yourself. Loud shoes, also in that same way. High heels, or where you can't get up and down, or small skirts. It's hard to get up and down off the ground. Even in the teens program, sometimes they're on the floor as well. Keeping children, teens safe, really, that's your number one role. That's that whole back against the wall so you can see everything. So if you're not sure about anything, or you see something, you say something, like Kim in that horrible incident, she said something, we got support in place immediately and we're able to support the situation. Having a working understanding of the adult commitments. So each studio will have a folder, hopefully they have it set up for you this year, that has the adult commitments, and so that could take us an hour just to talk about those, but it's something where we each level created what they all agree to as what they think are important in that level, and so we'll go over those and belief statements, any studio ground rules that have been established. Ask for specific things that you can do. There's a game called I Spy, or different sound games with young children. Choral reading, so a child that may not be reading yet, you try to read at the same time. So sometimes for some of you, you want to go in and have something to do, and so you could say, I'm here to sub, what's some things you can teach me how to do so I can do that each time I can come in. And then balance of respecting versus questioning their freedom and accountability. So I'm not sure exactly what you're doing, but I'm not really comfortable with it. Can we walk over together and talk to Faith so we can understand what the process is about that? That works out better than, I don't think you're supposed to be doing that, So you can always push it off on us. We're here to help you. Defer discipline to the teacher or the advisor in the room. We're not putting you in that role, but please let us know. And again, walking with the child is really helpful. Mostly collaborating instead of correcting, so if a child's doing something that's not okay, they're throwing their pencil across the room. I know this is my first time in the room, but I'm sure that's probably not something that you meant to do as a part of your community, so I'm wondering what we can do about it. So you're having this conversation. If you think it needs more direct conversation than that, you say, let's walk over and talk to Faith, because I'm not sure what to do when this happens. Direct versus indirect support, and so similar to what we talked about, putting the shoes on or putting their coats on. If you ever go down in early ed in December and see all the coats on the ground and the children put their arms in and flip them over their head, right? So that's an indirect support, because sometimes if they notice and the hood's down here, which is not what they intended, and they're like, oh, what happened? And you're like, oh, I wonder if we didn't put the hood by your feet. So that's a way to give support without putting their coat on for them. Communicate any concerns to the teacher in the studio. Please ask questions. We love questions. We'd rather have questions than you fake it till you make it. You're yawning. So you're not even paid. I was making fun.
I do it all day.
So here's, just a summary of how to be a super parent as a sub. After attending and viewing the workshop, you fill out this questionnaire, which you're all waiting so patiently for. If I can have a couple of helpers. You all want to help me do this? Just let me keep one of them this time. So Evan, that most of you know at the curved desk, will take this information that you fill out, and we'll do the questions and the answers together in just a minute. Those of you who've done this before, there are new answers, so you can't just go by the pattern if you remembered it from last year. So this is one of the first things that you do is fill this out. And then within a couple of days or a week or two, we'll have gotten your background check completed, and then you'll be put on our sub and or volunteer and or both roster. Communicate with Faith. So here's Faith's email address, fstout@shiningminds.com. And so if you're like, I want to get in and sub this year or volunteer, she can help you to get set up to start practicing. If there's a certain level you want to be at, please be as specific as you can. If you don't tell us what level you want to sub or volunteer, we don't know how to help, and if someone calls you to sub, they won't know which level you want to sub in. We'll collect these tonight, but if you know somebody who's not here tonight, they would just drop this off at the curved desk.
Do you have any more?
We'll make some more. Ask questions to seek understanding and learn to observe without impeding the learning process. And then how to be a super parent as a volunteer. So do the questionnaire again. Think about what you're interested in and how you would like to engage with learners. So maybe you want to come in and talk about what you do for a living. Maybe you just want to come read once a month, Maybe you want to help out with studio cleanliness and sanitizing. Make a plan with the studios you'd like to volunteer and be as consistent with your time as you can. The more you make a consistent time that you come, the better you're going to feel about being in the environment, and then the better the children and teens will acclimate to that process too. If you want to help with cleaning, please make sure you schedule that time with the studio teachers. If you'd like to help prepare materials, contact them as well. Going out trip orientation, that's the number one reason families that aren't able to sub like to do this workshop. I'll take one too. There's one behind you there too, a couple. So if you're going to join in on a going out trip, they'll ask you to come early so you can do the orientation for that. Again, just for consistency. Go ahead, Ethan. And then I said to volunteer or sub or both. We hope that you'll do both. We really appreciate every year, because I keep hiring you. Faith hopes that we have some really great additional super subs that she can call. We do try to give you notice ahead of time, but I know if I could speak for Faith, she's going to say, please call me back or text me back. It's really important, because then she can knock you off the list if you're not available. You're not going to hurt our feelings. We know you have lives, and if you just would let us know if you're on the sub list and we've asked you, just let us know if you don't. So we text, we call, so whichever way works best for you, but just please let us know if you're available that day or not. Each studio also supports a common space, so like Sapphire supports this space, and so you might want to come in and polish the rubber pieces that might get pen marks on them, and so you might want to help them with that. So if there's something like that you want to do as well. And so this kind of, again, summarizes up some of the information we talked about. We have 4 staff this year that are expecting. And one of the things that our staff does is that every year in March, those that want to are on a committee called Prioritizing the Moolah. And so we look at what our revenue was over expenses for the year, which we're very fortunate, and we think about how we want to spend that money. And so oftentimes they'll put things and plans together for how they want to spend the money. And we've been doing some things in the back 4 acres and so forth. And one of the things they wanted to do was raise the sub rate from $9 to $11 an hour to make sure that families knew we really appreciated them. And so we are super happy to share that with you. And it's one of the questions on your questionnaire. And but your consistent support's really appreciated. Okay, Ethan? You're fine. There's some resources. So we talked about that communication hits handout. You can check out books on MySpace. There's a process for that. Read Montessori philosophy and engage in conversations, the PIP workshops. So this will be posted on our blog. So if you go to our website and hit current families, and then you'll see our blog information. So you'll be able to share this with friends or family that also would like to sub or volunteer. All right, who's got question number 1? Volunteers should have approved plans with teachers prior to volunteering. Ooh, that wasn't very loud. Let's try again. I thought you would be so confident in that one. Studio assistants, subs, should arrive 20 minutes early and leave 20 minutes after pickup to support the preparation of the environment. True. One way to gain the respect of a child or teen is to talk loudly and tell them what they are doing wrong. False. Well, you really were listening. Wow, interdiscipline is something. Adults should praise each child multiple times a day and use whatever parenting style you grew up with in your childhood home. On a going out trip and in the studio, any concerns should be communicated to the teacher immediately, and all volunteers should be non-judgmental to other learners. When a child or teen becomes angry, I should also get a staff member for help. I can check out books in Barber Space for my own learning. Background checks are conducted on all volunteers and studio assistants. And it says the school currently pays for this, but we appreciate you waiving your first subbing pay to help pay for this. The sub rate is currently $9.50 an hour and can be waived for a donation. You're like, oh, part of that's true, part of that's false, right? So yes, it's $11 an hour and can be waived for a donation. So if you don't want to get paid, and some of our subs don't fill out all the forms, they just do it once a month or so as volunteer, then you just don't have to fill out all the forms for taxes and such. If you do not waive the sub rate, please obtain and return the payroll paperwork on the first day that you sub, and that goes through, Evan will either have the folder or Kelly, depending on when you get your folder. And so then it says, are you interested in being a studio assistant or sub when one of the co-teachers is absent, or volunteering, or both? So we hope you check both. And then your availability below there, so if you're subbing is really when you would use this. You can sub Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in the mornings, or all days in the afternoon. So whatever it is that you can do, that last part is really for subbing. The teachers probably won't call you for the volunteering. That's something you reach out to them about. I think we got one more there. Yeah. Questions, comments, thoughts? Yes, sorry.
Is there ever a time that 2 subs would be in a classroom together? Like you
No.
talked about season and maternity? That would
No. Never happens.
What happens on those teachers?
We move another teacher over. Yeah, we put the sub in the other studio. Yeah.
I have 2 early ed learners,
Yeah.
but I'm interested in subbing other areas.
Great, yeah.
But like drop-off time is a little
So it's a good question, and oftentimes in early ed, they'll ask you not to sub in your child's studio at first anyway. And so, if your child's in trapezoid, you might want to sub in quatrefoil or one of the other studios first. And then as you show that your child's okay with you being, nearby, then you maybe start coming in for an hour or 2 and go from there. And then if your child needs to be here for extended learning because your studio doesn't start till 9 and the studio you're subbing in starts at 8:20, then you would just let Faith know that you're gonna need the extended learning, and when you drop them off, just let them know you're subbing. Okay. If your child really has no idea and they've never been in that environment before, you probably just need to let Faith know you're not available until 9, and we can always have a DS or somebody else support the environment until you can be there.
Okay.
Good questions. Faith, am I missing anything? I had all of it? You didn't have hardly anything to correct me on this year. Yeah.
So I remember when you could observe the lowest level outside the windows What is observing like in the older studios?
So you can call the studio or email the studio and say, can I just come in and to observe? And so they'll set you up in a chair where you'll just observe and you won't interact with children. And so that's the way to do that in the other studios besides early ed. Yep. Yes?
What about bringing a baby?
So babies can't come as a sub or as, but if you're coming like to work in the media center and you have your baby and they're able to be contained and not be in a dangerous situation, that would be okay.
Had them in a carrier or something.
Yeah. So if you're like in the media center, yeah, that would be fine. Yep.
The things we signed up for online, like the book fair,
Yes.
and different things like that.
Yep.
Where do we have to sign up again, or how does that go?
They have your information, so they'll be communicating to you. Do you want to say anything more about that, PIP council? Sorry, she's not hearing me. Jennifer, do you want to say anything more about, she was saying she signed up for book fair. They'll just let you know, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so they don't need to do anything else at this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just sign up and we'll
Yeah.
let you know in a little bit.
Yep. Great. Thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. If you just want to leave your forms there with Glenn, have a great night. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks, Ethan.